Hello YouTube, this is Bowtied Media, and today I've got a little bit of a different video. And the reason it's going to be different is because I started this channel in about the halfway point of 2020. And I started reviewing music, or I guess more specifically albums and EPs, on a more serious level at the beginning of 2020, right as the year started. It's something I wanted to do, and only halfway through, about 5 months, 6 months later, I decided to start this project. And so there's stuff that came out earlier in the year that I want to talk about, stuff that I want to review, the albums and EPs that I've come out in the year of 2020, but stuff that I have not covered yet. And so this video is going to be a cover of those EPs, and I'm going to go back and look at that. But if you want to see anything that I've reviewed or rated, or my whole ranking list of the year so far, you can go to albumoftheyear.com and go to my profile, Bowtied Media. It should be in a little link right there. But yeah, so let's get into the video. So like I said, this video is going to be about the EPs that have come out in 2020 so far. And I haven't covered a whole ton of stuff, only a little bit. I think it's only about 60 reviews total I've done so far this year, and that includes the stuff that I've reviewed on this channel already. So I think I've got about 12 to 15 EPs that are going to be talking about today, and I'm going to try to go in chronological order. It's not perfectly chronological, but it's somewhat chronological. The first EP I'm going to be talking about is Whereisalex's Overthinker EP. And I've got friends that really love his style, but I've always sort of been flip-flopping and not really sure where I place myself. But this EP as a whole was pretty strong. I would say it was just above average for me. It's a lot of great, perfect, background studying music, if that makes sense. And it's not super complex to any extent, but it's a great background kind of listening EP. And this EP I would have rated a 7. Up next is CloudNone's Wish EP. And CloudNone has put out a lot of stuff on Monstercat already and put out a crap ton of music in a short amount of time. And this EP is, I guess, even further solidified CloudNone's style and his production quality. But this one is kind of, I think it's his weaker EPs in general. I feel like the CloudNone, it's weird to say kind of like the punch that he gives in his tracks, they're not quite as evident, I think, in this EP than they are, or they have been in others. And I know that sounds weird, CloudNone isn't like a very chill, trip chill kind of garage style, but I think that would make a lot of sense if you really go back and hear his other stuff. It doesn't have quite the same punch as energy as I would have liked, but it's CloudNone and I do really like his style a lot. This EP also scores a 7. Up next is Hex Cougar's Under the Light of a Dying Moon. I think Hex Cougar's style wasn't really for me, and I actually reviewed and looked at this EP before he had a release on Monstercat that came out, the collaboration with Kuro. But yeah, this kind of weird jungle trap style is really not for me. There's an interesting dichotomy of the calmness and the real intensity, or the calmness of the verses and the pre-chorus, and then the drop. And there's just a really big mix, and sometimes it works, but this EP doesn't really work for me. The song Sacrifice is a great example of this, where the drop kind of just ends, and there's not a really proper transition into the rest of the track. And for these reasons, this album gets a 5. Up next is Draper's KUDOCLASM. I've been a huge fan of Draper ever since he came to Monstercat, and a lot of his songs are on the list of my all-time favorites, actually. But this EP just is bad. It's not that great. I wouldn't say it's awful, but it's really not prime Draper. I think this EP struggles the most with cohesiveness. There's an interlude that makes me feel like I want to connect all the songs together, but considering all 4 tracks are totally different genres, and they don't really have any cohesiveness or narrative thematics, anything that connects them all together, it just feels like 4 random songs that were not going to be released as singles were just put in an EP, and there it was. And for those reasons, this EP gets a 4. Up next is Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats' Unlocked EP. While this isn't my style of hip-hop rap, I actually really enjoyed this EP, and I really loved the thematic elements it was going for and the stylistic design choices they took. The video that goes along with the EP is incredible, and you should definitely give it a watch. It's very funny and fits well with what the EP is trying to convey. It's not my style, but it goes hard, and I would listen to it if other people were easily. And for these reasons, I'd give this a 7. Up next is Glacier's Temple Inward. This EP is absolutely stunning. It is, spoiler, my favorite of the year so far, of 2020. All of this has kind of been Glacier's, he's been ramping up to create what this is, this EP, this beautiful, magnificent EP. All the songs score higher than an 8, so all the songs are either 8, 9, or 10 for me, and I absolutely just love this whole thing as a cohesive unit. Birchview and Yubi are easily standouts for me for this entire track, and the last drop of Yubi is actually one of my favorite kind of 30 seconds of any Monstercat song ever, really. For all the people that know a lot of Monstercat stuff, I think Glacier is kind of taking over Haywire in his kind of absence that he's left on the label. And I think he's become the new really funky, upbeat, energetic producer. Temple Inward scores a 9. Up next is Slumberjack's Black and Blue EP. And I also went a little flip-flop on this one. I'm not quite sure where I put it. A lot of times I don't love the tracks when I hear them, but other times when they kind of come out of context, I'm like, oh, I actually really enjoy this track. So this one it's all over the place for me. I really like Slumberjack's sound design. They've stayed consistent with that for a long time, ever since Sarawak. They kind of came out and made this almost like jungle trap vibe. And this one, I guess, compared to the Hex Cougar, which also feels, I guess, jungle trappy, Hex Cougar sounds a lot like darker and deeper, where this is a little bit more lighthearted and something I would call like treble trap, where it sounds really high. But I would score this EP a 6. Up next is Disclosure's Ecstacy. And this thing is pretty good. It's got a lot of deep house, like Saharan, Middle Eastern vibes to it, and reminds me a lot of the early 2000s kind of music scene, especially the house. The atmosphere across these 5 tracks is just incredible, and even more perfect would be for at a club or festival. This would absolutely blow people's minds to hear in a big setting like that. I've always been a big Disclosure fan, and this EP gets an 8. Up next is Ford, Soon, and Hanz's Good Company. This style of music and genre is really up my alley. This is kind of reminds me a lot of Odessa and Casbo and Fiji and Direct, and all of them kind of fit to this moody, atmospheric, and also upbeat at the same time vibe. This music is what I consider driving music. Also something to the Tones of Eden, where that sounds like it's just something that you would want to play in like a dark drive at night in the fog, and something that it just feels nice in that sense. I would love to see the 3 of these work on some more stuff, but this EP gets a 7. Up next is Pixel Terror's Upgrade EP. Pixel Terror brings 5 fiery tracks to this EP, and each of them are unique in their own sense. All the collaborations add a lot more depth to the EP, and while this isn't the best kind of hype music that Pixel Terror has put out, it's still pretty solid, and for that reason, it will also score a 7. Up next is Lontalius and Singular Balance's Alive. These 2 producers are kind of indie electronic producers and / singers, and I'm not a huge fan of this. I think their vocals in this EP are a lot more muffled than I'm used to, and I listen to quite a bit of Eden, and he does a lot of that kind of muffly sound, but a lot of it is very inaudible, I think, at points, and the mixing just feels a little off, but even then, it's still a nice little thing, I guess. It's pretty neutral for me, and that's why it scores a 5. Up next is Crankdat's Mechanized Mayhem, and this album's title definitely speaks for itself. And this thing sounds like the entire time someone is just smacking big steel drums. Big steel containers of anything. It just sounds like absolute chaos the whole time. I really don't like obsessive swearing in songs, and this uses a lot of it. This EP just kind of throws it out there for, I guess, no apparent reason. None of these tracks feel like bangers that I would even want to put in a hype or warm-up playlist, and this just feels like kind of a bad attempt at this kind of style. I know Crankdat can do a lot better, and I've heard him do a lot better. This is just a no for me. And for those reasons, this one is getting a 3. Up next is CloudNone and Direct's technically EP. It's a double-sided single, but for the sake of Monstercat labeling that as an EP, I will say it's an EP. It's Mojito and Margarita. These 2 producers really complement each other's style, and I like what they put together a lot. And, I mean, I really, really do love Margarita. Mojito's just okay, but it's just 2 songs, so it's not a ton, but they're well produced, and so it's kind of up in the air. That's why I give this a 7. Up next is 7 Lions Find Another Way. While the track Remember is an absolute standout for me, the rest of the other 3 songs on this EP are pretty generic melodic dubstep tracks. I think this is a pretty solid, I guess, run-of-the-mill album. There's not a ton to it. It seems pretty safe and pretty, I guess, normal for 7 Lions, other than, I guess, again, Remember, which had an awesome psytrance and hardcore drop. That song was just phenomenal, but the rest of it was meh. So this EP gets a 6. Up next is F.O.O.L's Revenger. And this is F.O.O.L's 3rd EP on Monstercat, and he stayed very true to his stylistic roots of the almost synthwave / electro house. While the tracks are pretty good, they are pretty mundane as well, and they don't have that oomph, I guess, that F.O.O.L kind of can put together in some of his other tracks. F.O.O.L is really not generally my style, so I guess take this with a grain of salt, but this is getting a 6. Up next, and finally for this video, is Reaper's Renegade EP. And I know people at Monstercat love Reaper so much, and I wasn't the hugest fan of what he's put out right away. His really heavily distorted drum and bass and drum step genres and tracks were just too much for me, and they feel way too aggressive, and they don't feel like they have a lot of punch to them, but they don't feel fun in my ears. They don't feel like they're something that I want to generally listen to all the time. Although, that being said, Barricade is a phenomenal track. That is easily the best thing Reaper's put out, and it's definitely up my alley and my style for what I like in my drum and bass. I just would have wished the whole EP was more like Barricade, but I understand that Reaper has this niche kind of land and down pat. But for these reasons, I give it a 6. But thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Bowtied Media. If you want to see my ranking and the full list where everything is, like how the 7s compare to each other, because there's a decent amount of them in this video, you can go to albumoftheyear.com and look for Bowtied Media, and all my stuff is there. And if you follow me there, you can maybe potentially see some ratings and rankings before a video even goes live. But I've been Bowtied Media. I will see you guys in another video.